सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं कर्वावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, so we are on mantra number 7 of the third section of the second chapter. So Tanmay, would you please take it from 7 to 14?
Indriyebhyah param manaha.
Indriyebhyah param manaha.
Manasas sattvam-uttamam.
Manasa sattvam-uttamam.
Sattvadadhi mahanatma.
Sattvadadhi mahanatma.
Mahato vyaktam-uttamam.
Mahato vyaktam-uttamam.
Avyaktattu parah purushah.
Avyaktattu parah purushah.
Vyapako linga evacha.
Vyapako linga evacha.
Yam jnatva muchyate jantuhu.
Yam
Jnatva muchyate jantuhu.
Amritatvancha gacchati.
Amritatvam cha gacchati.
Na sandrishe tishthati rupamasya.
na
Sandrishe tishtati rupamasya.
Na chakshusha pashyati kaschanainam.
Na chakshusha pashyati kaschanainam.
Hrada manisha manasa vikliptaha.
Hrida manisha manasa vikliptaha.
Ya etad viduramritaste bhavanti.
Ya etat viduraste bhavanti.
Yada panchavatishthante.
Yada panchavatishthante.
Jnanani manasa saha.
Jnanani manasa saha.
Buddhischana vicheshtati.
Buddhischana vicheshtati.
Tamahuh paramangatim.
Tamahu paramagati.
Tan yogamiti manyante.
Yogamiti manyante.
Hiram indriya dharanam.
Dhiram-indriya-dharanam.
Apramattastada bhavati.
Apramattastada bhavati.
Yogo hi prabhavapyayau.
Yogo hi prabhavapyayau.
Naiva vachana manasa.
Naiva vachana manasa.
Praptum shakyo na chakshusha.
Praptum shakyo na chakshusha.
Astiti pruvatoonyatra.
Asti
Pruvatoonyatra.
Katham tadupalabhyate.
Katham tadupalabhyate.
Astitevopalabdhavyam.
Astitevopalabdhavyam.
Tattvabhavena chobhayoho.
Tattvabhavena chobhayoho.
Astitevopalabdhasya.
Astitevopalabdhasya.
Tattvabhavah prasidati.
Tattvabhavah prasidati.
Yada sarve pramuchyante.
Yada sarve pramuchyante.
कामायेस्य हृतिश्रिताः
कामायस्य प्रतिष्ठिताः
अथ मर्त्यो मृतो भवति
अधमर्त्यो भवति
अत्र ब्रह्म समश्नुते
अत्र ब्रह्म
समश्नुते.
Thank you, Amri. Okay, so the seventh mantra, Manaha, the mind, Param is superior. Manaha, the mind, is Param, superior to what? Indriyabhya. And Sattvam Uttamam. So here Sattvam means the Buddhi, the intellect. Sattvam Uttamam. Uttamam means superior to. So Sattvam is Uttamam. Intellect is superior to Manasaha. And Mahan Atma. So here Mahan Atma is basically for Mahat. Okay, the cosmic intellect. Adhisattvat is superior to the individual intellect. Avyaktam, the unmanifest Uttamam Mahataha. Unmanifest Maya is superior to Mahat also. Okay. So basically this is all a description of the internal journey, the Nidhasanam which is going on. And what is here? The most important or one of the most important qualifications on the journey is dropping your mamakara and ahankara. The ego and the mine and me. Mamakara and ahankara is mine and me. The moment these two are renounced, the knowledge becomes clear. And as a sample, Indriyabhya is being mentioned. But really speaking, we have 5 layers of Anatma, which are the Panchakosha. All Panchakosha are Anatma only. Another way of looking at the 3 bodies. So you can either say that we have 3 layers of Anatma or 5 layers of Anatma, whichever way you look at. And here we look at the 5 layers of Anatma called Panchakosha. What is the job? What is the work that we are doing while doing the Nidhasanam? You have to drop the body identification, the Deha Abhimana, the Kosha Abhimana in each one of them. Because why should you do that? Because you are the very consciousness principle itself. You are Atma, because of which each of the koshas gets so-called life. You are the original consciousness. You are the OC, lending the RC to the kosha, which is only the RM. And this mental dropping or mental separation of myself from the Anatma is called Panchakosha Viveka. So if this verse looks familiar to you, why does it look familiar? First question is, does it look familiar?
Yes,
Then why does it look familiar?
we were reading about it in the Bhagavad Gita as well.
Bhagavad Gita, okay. But in this Upanishad? The first chapter, 3rd section. There are 2 mantras which are almost similar. Mantra 10 and 11 of this. So 1, 3, 10 and 1, 3, 11. That you must note down and go back and see again. So this verse 7 and 8 is almost a repetition of those 2 verses. So he's saying Indriya Bhya Param Manaha. The mind is superior to the sense organs, Indriyas, Indriya Bhya. To the Indriyas, Param Manaha, the mind is superior. So in the Nidhasanam that you do, which is the first to be dropped, first the sense organs have to be dropped. You have to say that I am not the Indriyas. And to do that, the mind is there, and therefore the mind can be dropped only later. So it is like removing the coat and the shirt. You cannot remove the shirt without removing the coat. So here the sense organs of the outer covering, they have to be dropped. Then only the inner covering can be dropped. And the mind is powerful. Why? Because the mind is the controller of all the indriyas. And therefore, first, the sadhaka will withdraw all the indriyas. And when you withdraw all the indriyas, remember that you are identifying with which kosha? The mind, the manomaya kosha. So from the pranamaya kosha, you withdraw yourself. You renounce the pranamaya kosha as not yourself. This is the neti neti principle. Neti neti, the pranamaya kosha I am not. And therefore, it has to be in graded steps. You can't go straight from Annamaya to Atma. So it always in graded steps. So you have to identify first with the mind. When you say I, the mind, am the Atma, what you are effectively doing is you are saying that the Pranamaya Kosha is Anatma, the Annamaya Kosha is Anatma. So each time you refer to a inner kosha as yourself, as the Atma, all the outer koshas are being disidentified as Atma and being relegated to Anatma status. And here the word Sattvam, Sattvam Uttamam, refers to the intellect. So Manaha Sattvam Uttamam means the intellect is superior to the mind. And what is the intellect? We saw Samshaya Atmakam, Mananishchaya Atmakam Buddhi. There are two things. The mind is Samshaya Atmakam. Intellect is Nishchaya Atmakam. Samshaya Atmakam Manaha, Nishchaya Atmakam Buddhi. Samshaya Atmakam Manaha means the mind has the nature of doubting. Nishchaya Atmakam Buddhi means Buddhi will be the one which takes decisions, analyzes and takes decisions. And Sattvadhi Mahan Atma. So superior to the individual intellect. The individual intellect is which kosha?
Vijnanmaya kosha.
Vijnanamaya kosha. So Tattvat Adhi Mahan Atma. So Sattvam here is again intellect, which means Vijnanamaya kosha. Superior to that is Mahan Atma. Mahan Atma is the collective intellect. Vijnanamaya kosha is the Vyashti level, at the individual level. Mahan Atma, otherwise called Mahat. Mahat is the collective total intellect. You can refer to it as the total buddhi of Hiranyagarbha, total intellect of Hiranyagarbha. And therefore, that total intellect is superior to the individual intellect. So, Samashti Buddhi is superior to Vyashti Buddhi. So, here, once having reached Vijnanamaya Kosha, what are you doing? You are moving from the individual Vijnanamaya Kosha to the Samashti Vijnanamaya Kosha. That is important here, okay? You are moving from Vijnanamaya Kosha not to Anandamaya Kosha. You are moving from Vijnanamaya Kosha to Samashti Vijnanamaya Kosha. Hiranyagarbha's Vijnanamaya Kosha, also called Samashti Buddhi, the macro intellect. Why are we doing this? Because at this level of your Nidhasanam or sadhana, you have to drop the Vyashti identity. You have to drop the micro identification and identify with the macro, the Samashti. So from Taijasa, I'm not explaining Taijasa because I would like to believe that all of you are familiar with Tattva Bodha. So from Taijasa, you have to step over into Hiranyagarbha. Okay. Also remember that whenever we say Buddhi, it can be taken as a synonym for Sukshma Shariram. Why? Because Buddhi is part of the subtle body. Therefore, superior to the Sukshma Shariram is what? Karana Shariram. Mahato Avyaktaha. And the Sanchita Karma is located in that Karana Shariram. I have to drop the Abhimana there also. And therefore, he is not talking about the individual Karana Shariram. He is talking about the collective, the Samashti Karana Shariram called Avyaktam. So, Shankaracharya very often, when he talks about Karana Shariram, he does not distinguish between Vyashti Karanam, the individual micro level Karanam, and the Samashti Karanam at the macro level. Why does he not distinguish? We talked about this in detail in Vedanta Sara classes, which is why it's very important. Sorry?
Nirvikalpaka Rupa.
Yes, Nirvikalpa Rupa. The fact is that there is no distinction at all in either. Both are what is known as one lump. You don't have individual distinctions. And since you cannot distinguish what is in the Karma Shariram, obviously there is no distinction between Vyashti and Samashti. And therefore, very often Shastra uses them as interchangeable words. So here, Avyaktam is unmanifest, the Samashti Karma Shariram. So the journey is to Hiranyagarbha to Samashti Karma Shariram called Antaryami. And this Avyaktam, this Antaryami was called Maya in Tattvabodha. Now, having come to Samashti Karma Shariram, is the journey over? No. What do we do from there? That is indicated in the next mantra. So that next mantra we have already read, we have already chanted. So now look at it. Purushaha tu. Purushaha means Atma. Purushaha tu. But Atma is indeed Avyaktat Paraha, superior to the unmanifest. Avyaktam is unmanifest. Superior to the Antaryami, superior to the Samashti Karana Shariram. Why? Vyapakaha, it is all pervading. And so you have to break it up properly. Vyapakaha Alingaha Evacha. The second part of the first line of the mantra is Vyapakaha Alingaha Evacha. Eva Alingaha means indeed without any attributes, without any gunas. And Yam Gyatva, having known this, Jantuhu Muchyate. Jantuhu is the one who is born, the mortal. Jantuhu Muchyate. Muchyate is free. Jantuhu gets free from mortality, gets liberation. And what happens to him? Amrutatvam cha gacchati. Amrutatvam gacchati. He goes towards Amrutatvam. Immortality he goes towards. Or you can take it as attains immortality. So here, Yamaraj is saying that when you reach Karana Shariram, when do you reach Karana Shariram? We must be very clear about what the words mean. When do I reach Karana Shariram? Do I reach it at all? And when do I reach it?
Once we have brought the Stula and Sukshma Sharira, this process of the
Sorry, June, can you come again?
once we have dropped the process of once we have dropped the Stula and Sukshma Sharira, the process of that.
Okay. Okay, but a little bit more explicit. Anybody else?
Nirvikalp Samadhi.
No. Nirvikal Samadhi, we are not talking about over here.
Is it the simplest answer, Sushupti?
Yes, it is the simplest answer. Sushupti Avastha, okay? So every day you reach Karma Shariram, is it not? What do you do in Sushupti Avastha? Your mind, your Sukshma Shariram withdraws into Karana Shariram. So Vedanta is complex if you think of it as complex. If you look at the obvious, it is very simple. So Karana Shariram means I have withdrawn into Sushupti Avastha. In Sushupti Avastha, what is the experience? Or rather, we talked about yesterday. It is Prayena Ajnaha. Prajnaha is Prayena Ajnaha, almost totally ignorant. And when I am saying almost totally ignorant, I hope you remember yesterday, what does it mean? You?
We only know that we did not experience anything.
Almost totally Ignorance means almost, but not totally. So something must be there. So there are two pieces of knowledge which you have in Sushupti Avastha or in Karana Shariram. What is that? One is the knowledge that I have no knowledge. I am not experiencing anything is one knowledge. The other is that I am happy. So those two pieces of experience of knowledge are there in Sushupti Avastha, that and Karma Shariram has these two. That is why the name Pragnya. So this almost total silence, almost total blankness is not nothingness. It is Karma Shariram where everything is in potential condition. Karma Shariram is, as the name implies, causal body. Causal body is the cause of both the other bodies. So when you experience this almost total blankness or silence, you are in Karana Avastha, you are in Sushupti Avastha. The only thing is, this internal silence can be known only post your Sushupti, because the mind wakes up. Now, apart from this, when you come out of the Karana Shariram, then only do you remember. So having reached the Karana Shariram, Yamaraj says, from that Karana Shariram, you can't rest there, because it is not Atma. It is almost total blankness, but it is not Atma. Why? Because you know that there is blankness. If you know there is blankness, the question you can ask is, who is it that is aware of the blankness? Who is it that is aware of the lack of experience, of the absence of experience? So from there, Yamaraj says, Avyaktat. From that Avyakta Karana Shariram, remember here, we can talk about it as Samashti Karanam, as Antaryami. Okay, because your mind has to have expanded. If you don't expand from Veshti Sukshma to Samashti Sukshma and then to Samashti Karanam, this job is going to be more difficult. So from the Samashti Buddhi only now we are talking. Samashti Sukshma Shariram. From the macro subtle body only we are talking. From that macro subtle body, which is called what? Hiranya Garbha. Please remember the Tattvabodha. From that macro subtle body, which is Hiranya Garbha, you have to move to the Antaryami. From Antaryami, you have to move to Atma. So he says, Avyaktat Paraha Purushaha. Superior to that Antaryami is the Atma. From that blankness, almost total silence, almost total lack of knowledge, you have to come to Atma. So Vedanta says that when you are experiencing this silence, always remember that silence is not Atma, because you can say that I am experiencing that silence, that blankness. And therefore, there is always somebody who is aware of that blankness, right? It's like, you're going to the Shiva Hall in Vedanta, in the ashram at Nayar Dam. You walk there and then I ask you who was there, and then you say there was nobody there in the hall. Is that statement accurate? What should you say to make that statement absolutely accurate? How should you word that statement?
Nobody other than me was there.
You have to say there was nobody other than me. I, the experiencer, I, the pramata, the seer was there, and there was nobody other than me. So when you say the hall is empty, it means that you are talking about the emptiness of the hall. Similarly, when you say there is blackness, you, the consciousness principle, are talking about the blankness of the mind. That empty mind means a mind which is not empty. What is there in the mind when there are no thoughts? Chaitanyam, the consciousness principle, is always there. Therefore, when you say my mind is empty, It means my mind is empty of everything excepting the consciousness principle. Because it is the consciousness principle which is aware of the emptiness of the mind. The consciousness principle you cannot observe because you are the consciousness principle, the observing consciousness you are. And therefore that observing consciousness, that witness consciousness, you cannot observe. And if you want to be clear about the witness consciousness, it has the definition which we have always given it. I am not part, product, property, etc., etc. Those 5 principles you should remember whenever we talk about I, the witness consciousness. So he says, avyaktat tu paraha purushaha. There is somebody who is observer of this antaryami silence. The ignorance of the antaryami, the silence in the antaryami, there is somebody who observes. And that observer is called parapurushaha. And where is this parapurushaha located? So he says vyapakaha, all pervading. Vyapakaha is there, okay, in the first line, the 4th word, vyapakaha. All pervading is that observer. And that's why we have the definitions, sthano, nitya, sarvagataha, etc. Okay. So that all pervading purushaha is the observer. And one more adjective is given, alinga evacha. Okay. Now, what does lingam mean? The definition is yena lingyate tat lingam. Yena lingyate means that by which something is known, tat lingam. That is called lingam. Okay. So those of you who are not familiar with the word lingam, you should know that we have a very famous representation of Lord Shiva. What is that called?
Shivalingam.
Shivalingam. Why is it called Shivalingam? Yena lingyate. That by which Shiva is known. That is called the lingam. That's the correct definition of lingam, not all those things which we hear. That by which something is known, an indicator. A lingam is an indicator that something is there. Okay. So this is a normal meaning of lingam, which doesn't have too much of relevance in the context. And so Shankaracharya writes saying that this lingam is to be understood as that indicator which indicates that there is a jiva present. What is an indicator? I am not explaining word by word. I would like you to, get involved in this conversation. What is that indicator by which you know that a jiva is present?
I know I am.
June, for some reason you are, it appears as if you're talking from Mars or something. I don't know why. Your mic is off, June. Very, very, very barely audible. Anybody?
RC.
RC. Okay.
Is it Sukshma Shariram?
Very good. Sukshma Shariram is also called what? Have you heard it being referred to as Linga Shariram? Right? So that by which the jiva is known, that is why Sukshma Shariram is called Linga Shariram. And that's what this means. Yena lingyate tat lingaha. And therefore Shankara says, use that definition and take lingam here as equivalent to Sukshma Shariram, subtle body. And he adds to that. When I say Sukshma Shariram, I mean take the Sukshma Shariram as an indicator also, not only for the jiva, but as a upalakshanam, as a general category for all the 3 bodies. So, yena lingam, or the lingam here means all 3 bodies. All the 3 bodies. And alinga therefore means without any body, free of the three bodies. So this Atma is all-pervading, vyapakaha, alingaha, has no connection with anybody, no sambandha with anybody, therefore asangaha. And yam gyatva, having known the Atma in this manner, in which manner we may not know. So Shankara says, Acharyataha shastrascha, through the medium of the Shastram and the medium of the Acharya. Only in that manner, if you know the Atma, muchyante jantuhu, the jiva is freed. And you might say, freed from what? So he adds, avidyadi hridaya granthyabihi, from the knots of the heart, which are avidya, etc. Which is kamaha, krodaha, all those emotions are generally referred to as avidya, etc. Why? Because what is the connection between avidya and kama and krodha and lobha and moha and matsarya? Why does he refer to it as adi? Avidya adi means avidya, etc. Avidya, etc. we are saying is avidya, kama, krodha, etc. Why is that so? What is the connection?
They're the products of avidya.
Products of ignorance.
How?
Because avidya gives rise to apurnatvam. Apurnatvam gives rise to kama. Kama gives rise to karma, and then so on.
Okay, so that's correct. So that is called the parampara, that paramparik, the lineage of avidya, the product line, that you must always remember. So avidya is the moolam, the main cause. And that is why elsewhere we said, vidyate hridaya granthibihi. Where did we say that? This is an advanced plus. Everything should be there in your mind. Vidyate hridaya granthibihi.
Mundaka.
Mundaka Upanishad. Okay, so please remember all these things, and then because of that, muchyate. He will get freedom from all the problems at the Anatma level. Will the problems go away? No. Summer in Ahmedabad will continue to be 47 degrees. Okay, the problems are not going to go away. The sun is not going to become cooler. Problems will continue. Why? Because it is the nature of Anatma to have problems. So the understanding here is Anatma problems will not go away. They do not get solved by Atma Jnana. But I have given up connection with the Anatma. The Anatma Abhimanam. My identification with the Anatma I have given up. And therefore, while this Anatma continues to have issues, I do not claim these issues as my problems. And the best way is my house, my flat in Kerala. I had a flat in Kerala once upon a time. It had a slightly leaky roof, which was a problem for me, right? But after I sold it, the leaky roof ceased to be my problem. Why? Because my connection with the flat was broken. And similarly, when your connection with your body, mind, sense complex breaks, the problems of your body, mind, sense complex, they cease to be your problems. You transfer all the problems to the buyer. Who is the buyer in this case? Who is the buyer of your body?
Maya.
Maya, Ishvara. Buyer is Maya, Ishvara. You have to transfer the problem because you've given up the connection, right? The moment you give up the connection, that body mind complex goes back to its original owner, which is Ishvara or Maya.
Can I please see? They're not buying. They're not looking to buy anything. You're forcefully giving it to them, essentially.
You have broken the connection.
Yeah.
See, it reminds me of a story which I read. There was this. Most people talk about Buddha, but there could be anybody. Okay, there was a sage who was sitting and meditating somewhere, and then all these a group of boys, they got together and started to abuse the sage. The Rishi, he listened very carefully for about 1 hour. Then he smiled and said, if you are finished, then I would like to go because I've got to go to the next village before the sun, or the sun becomes much later. Before the sun drops, I must go. Okay, sun sets. So these boys are very intrigued. So they asked him, we have abused you so much. How is it that you are not bothered? So he said, I will conduct an experiment. You go and buy one packet of sweets and come to me. One of the boys went to the local sweet shop and got a packet of sweets and came and gave it to the Buddha or the sage. And he refused to accept. Then he said, now, whom do the sweets belong to? So the boy said, it belongs to me. And this Rishi said, if I had accepted the sweets, who would it belong to? The boy said, belong to you. So the sage said, you replace the sweets with the abuse. The same logic holds. If I accept your abuse, then I have a right to be angry. But if I don't accept the abuse, how does it matter? So if you don't accept this body, mind, sense complex of yours as yourself, it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the original owner, which is Easwara or Maya. Right? And this is moksha. So change from ownership to being the witness or non-owner or trustee helps us to shift from worrying to caring. And that is why Krishna said, Advaishta Sarva Bhutana. And this is, Shankara adds over here, Jivan Neva. This happens even while he lives. And Shankara adds that after the body falls, he will get Videha Mukti. Therefore, Amrutatvam Chagachati. He goes towards immortality. A very, very beautiful verses. Remember, they are just not mantras. They are meant for Nidhasanam purposes. From now on, every Upanishad that we do, we will try to look at it from the practical point of Nidhasanam. There is no point in studying the Upanishad as a text. It's a story, right? It's some facts and figures. It doesn't do any good to us. But if we are looking at every mantra as something which can be utilized by us in our spiritual journey, then it makes sense. So that is why all this Nidhasanam focus. If you look at it, it is not there in the mantra at all. But that is the way it is supposed to be done. Now we look at the 9th mantra. So, Asya Rupam. Asya means this. Rupam means nature. Asya Rupam, the nature of this Atma is what? Natishtati. It does not fall Sandrishe. Sandrishe is in the range of perception. So, Atma is such that it does not fall in the range of perception. You cannot perceive. The 5 Indriyas are not capable of perceiving this Atma. And therefore he adds, Na kaschana enam pashyati. Nobody sees this Atma chakshushaha, with the eyes. Nobody can see the Atma with the eyes. But what happens? Abhiklaptaha. Abhiklaptaha means revealed. It is revealed manasa, in the mind. How? Manisha, by the knowledge gained through the intellect. And where does this Atma reside? Hridaya, in the heart. And those who understand this, te ye viduhu, those who know etat, this Atma, amrita bhavanti, they become immortal. So this is the sadhana which we are supposed to do. Sadhana prescribed through Panchakosha Viveka. We saw in the last couple of mantras, we are trying to do Panchakosha Viveka, Panchakosha meditation. What is the main and the most important and indeed the toughest part of the sadhana? Drop me and mine. Me is ahankara, mine is mamakara. And therefore drop ahankara and mamakara. This dropping of the ahankara and mamakara is also called sannyasa. And therefore, sannyasa sahita jnanam, that is to say, jnanam with sannyasa is jnanam which will give you moksha. Jnanam without dropping ahankara and mamakara is just book knowledge. And when we say sannyasa here, even Shankara doesn't talk about leaving the family here. Here sannyasa means the giving up of aham mama. Ahankara, mamakara, tyagaha. This has to be clearly understood. So as a grihastha, as a householder, if the householder manages to give up the identification with mama and aham, he is a sannyasi. You don't have to go and announce it to your wife, right? You know, I am renouncing you. All mine and me have renounced. All those things you don't need to do. Remember that one doesn't have to go and make a scene of it in front of the world or even in front of one's family. What is a family basically? A family is a group of people who are held together by the paste of karma, by the glue of karma, right? That karma is only our karma, doesn't belong to anybody else. And therefore, Yamaraj is not talking about giving up family. He is emphasizing the sadhana, which is in the form of a very subtle intellect. And that's the problem, because it requires so much of thinking. A lot of people say, Jnana Marga is very difficult. I would like to have Bhakti Marga. A lot of people, in fact, in this world, prefer Bhakti Marga because there I can sing Rama Rama Hare Hare. That is all that I have to do, you know, and I can cry lots and then say I'm a great Bhakta. So, but we all know by now, or we should know by now, that Bhakti Marga is good, of course, it is essential, but for what? For Chitta Shuddhi only. And after Chitta Shuddhi is obtained, I have to come to Jnanam. And unless I come to Jnanam, there is no hope of moksha. And since Atma is a very subtle, very abstract entity, it is I myself. But it needs a very, very sharp and refined and trained intellect to understand the Atma. And therefore it says, Asya Rupam. The Swarupam of this Atma, Na Sandrashe Tishtati, is not available to your sense organs. And Kaschana Enam Chakshusha Pashyati. This Atma cannot be perceived by your eyes. In fact, when we come to Kathopanishad, there is a very beautiful mantra which says that anything which you perceive, that is not the Atma. Anything which you hear, that is not the Atma. Anything which you touch, that is not the Atma. Anything which you know, that is not the Atma. So we'll come to that. And here, remember that when we are talking about anything which you see, we are not talking about symbols. A symbol is different from the form, right? The word, the number 5, which you write, that is a symbol. But what it represents, the 5, it doesn't have a form. It's an intellectual concept. And this buddhi has to learn to conceive of the abstract, which of course we all do. Even the smallest child in the KG class, he knows that this means 5. But this is only the symbol. The concept of 5, he learns to understand in his head. Similarly, when you say Om, Om is a symbol. It represents a power. Similarly, when you say Atma, very importantly, when you say Atma, remember that Atma is a symbol. But that symbol doesn't indicate a form at all. It's a formless entity which it indicates. And he says, Hrida. This formless entity, it resides in the heart. And te ye viduhu manishaha. Those who understand through the intellect, that this Atma is located in the Hridayam, in the heart. Because Shastra indicates that the heart is the golakam for the mind. So what is the connection between the heart, the mind and the Atma? All words which you use. Heart is there, mind is there, Atma is there. What is the connection? We are saying the Atma is in the mind, which is located in the heart. How should you extract the correct meaning? I hope the heads are not getting overheated. What is the correct meaning?
Can I try?
Please, madam.
So previously we have discussed that the golakam of the mind is the heart.
Yes.
So we can say that the sukshma heart resides in the golakam of sukshma mind resides in the golakam called the heart.
Yes.
And we have also discussed that mind is RM, the reflecting medium for Atma. So we can say the Atma is reflected there.
Very good. So that's how you see it. The heart is the golakam. The mind is the RM. And since the RC is available only where the mind is, and the RC indicates what? RC indicates the OC. Therefore, you say OC is available in the mind. You don't say OC is there in the mind. Big difference between OC is, situated in the mind and OC is available in the mind. So OC is available there. You can recognize the OC in the mind. OC is there everywhere, but in the mind it can be recognized because the mind is the reflecting medium. And manasa. How manasa means the buddhi, the teaching given by the Acharya and the Shastram. With the help of that teaching plus manisha, your sharp intellect, Atma is abhiklaptaha. Abhiklaptaha is, Shankara says, abhiprakashitaha, revealed. So Atma is revealed with the help of right understanding, which is gained through a focused intellect, which is gained through the study of the Shastram through a Acharya. And when this is done, etad viduhu, the student will understand that he is the Atma. So viduhu literally means he knows the Atma. But knowing the Atma is not different from being the Atma. And therefore, te amritaha bhavanti. That person will become immortal. Why? Because he becomes Brahman. Brahman is immortal. So study of the scriptures is very necessary because it refines the intellect. And as you will see, if you, after having gone through, say, all the major Upanishads, 10 Upanishads, or maybe 11 or 12 Upanishads, if you come back and revise your notes on the first Upanishad, you will see that suddenly there seems to be a complete change in your understanding. And this refinement of the intellect is one of the benefits of this study. And therefore, whenever we study Upanishad, remember this is only the preliminary first time study. It requires to be studied many, many times. And every study makes the mind more and more subtle. Once the mind is subtle, continued study reveals the various facets of the Upanishad. So Guru Upadesha is the mirror, Buddhi is the eyes. To see the Atma, you need both, the teacher as well as your intellect. Teacher means Shastra. And that is why Abhikritaha. Abhikritaha means it is revealed by the joint efforts of the Guru and the Shishya subtle Buddhi, backed by Shastra. Etad viduhu, the people who know this, amritaha bhavanti, they discover immortality. They are free of insecurity. Okay, so we look at the next one also. 10th mantra. So he says, Ahuhu. The people declare. Who people declare? Jnanis declare. Tam gatim paramam. That destination to be the highest destination. Yada. In which Pancha Jnanani. Where is Pancha Jnanani in this mantra? Look at the first line. Pancha Avatishtante Jnanani. So you have to break the word Pancha Avatishtante. Bring forward Jnanani connected to Pancha. It becomes the other. Yada Pancha Jnanani Manasa Saha Avatishtante. That is the Anvaya. You may have noticed that I have stopped doing Anvaya because now you guys should be able to, get the flow of Sanskrit by now. So what it means is Tam Gatim Paramam Ahu. They declare this to be the highest state, Yada, in which Pancha Jnanani, the five sense organs, Manasa Saha, together with the mind, and Buddhi Cha, Buddhi is the next line, Buddhi Cha, and the intellect, Avatishtante. Avatishtante means resides, abides. Abides where? The Atma. That you have to supply. Okay. So, and na vicheshtati. Now, vicheshtati means does not waver, does not go from one understanding to another understanding. Here, the five sense organs plus the mind plus the intellect, they are in the Atma. So basically, it's this whole mantra. As if you see the Shankara Bhashyam, Shankara normally explains the reason for a mantra in his introduction. So here in his mantra, in his introduction, he says, how can a focused intellect be attained? How can chitta ekagrata be attained? That is introduction to this mantra. So he says, tadartham yoga uchyate. For that purpose, this mantra describing yoga is being prescribed. Okay. So remember that this mantra is not Nidhasanam. This mantra is meant for making us focused in mind. Chitta ekagrata. So it is for clear intellect, not for jnana. And if this clear intellect had been available, then Shravanam and Mananam would have been sufficient to give jnana nishtha. But normally there is a deficiency, and this deficiency has to be compensated by. So there are two types of, two types of getting chitta ekagrata. One is before jnanam, and that is what we call upasana. If at the time of coming to jnanam, the upasana has been successfully practiced so that complete chitta shuddhi is there, then Shravanam and Mananam are sufficient to get jnana nishtha, not just jnanam, jnana nishtha. Okay. If upasana has been done, but 100% chitta shuddhi is not there, then Shravanam and Mananam will give you jnanam. But it will be jnanam with what? With some obstruction. Which means you will be a jnani, but you will not get the benefits of jnana. And therefore, why don't you get the benefits of jnanam? Because 100% chitta shuddhi, sadhana, chatushtas, sampanna is not there. And therefore, you, after jnanam, you enter into another practice to compensate for the deficiency, to eliminate that deficiency of not having 100% chitta shuddhi, and that is called nididhyasana. So here when he says yada, Shankara says yasmin kale. Yasmin kale means at that time. Which time? At the time which you come to chitta shuddhi. So the mantra here or the Upanishad here does not discuss the steps. We need to borrow from the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Bahiranga and Antaranga Sadhana. We have to borrow. So here, yada means, in Yoga Sutra terms, yada means after yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana. What comes after that?
Dhyana.
Dhyana. So dhyana kale, at the time of dhyanam. Not just dhyanam. Dhyanam preceded by yama, niyama, asana, pranayam, pratyahara, dharana. These have been already done. Because these are prescribed for Chitta Shuddhi. And therefore, Shankara says that this mantra is prescribing a combination of Upasana and Ashtanga Yoga for the Chitta Shuddhi which is required after Jnanam is got. Because you are a Jnani, but you are not a Jnananishtha. You have not got the benefits of Jnanam. And therefore, after becoming a Jnani, knowing without doubt that you are Brahman, but yet not able to reap the benefits of being Brahman, which is undisturbed mind. That is the main benefit. Because of that, you should continue to do Nidhasanam. Therefore, in this sloka 10 and 11, Yamaraj is talking about Nidhasanam, Vedantic meditation, as an important sadhana for those people who have got Jnanam without getting Jnananishtha at the same time, which means that their sadhana chatushtayam is not complete. And this Nidhasanam alone will help them in completely assimilating the teaching. What does completely assimilating the teaching mean? The teaching will be available spontaneously during any problematic times. And that teaching will keep your mind from getting disturbed. And this is possible. The spontaneous availability is possible only when the knowledge has traveled from the conscious level, the conscious mind, to the subconscious mind. Because a little introspection will show us that during a crisis, it is only the subconscious mind which functions well. Like it's like food. The food which I have eaten, it doesn't digest me. It doesn't nourish me. Only the digested food nourishes me. So eaten food versus digested food. That is a comparison. Knowledge in the conscious mind is food which I have eaten. Knowledge resident in the subconscious mind is knowledge which has been digested. And that is the reason I have to dwell upon this teaching again and again at very regular intervals. Otherwise, this teaching will remain as information, which is not the purpose of my study. The purpose of studying Vedanta is not to have information, it is to have transformation. And if the transformation does not take place, then the entire effort of 10 and 12 years of study would have gone waste. And while we are talking about Nidhasanam, I'll briefly mention two types of Nidhasanam. One is called Brahma Abhyasa Rupa Nidhasanam. Brahma Abhyasa Rupa Nidhasanam. Those who have gone through the Drik Drishya Viveka will remember that we talked about this as Samadhi. Brahma Abhyasa Rupa Samadhi. What is that? In and through every activity of yours, in your day-to-day activities, you should remember, always have this Vedantic teaching as background music. It should be always available to you. And that is why in the 5th chapter of the Gita, Krishna said, Pashyan Srinvan Prashan Jagran. All the actions you do, but remember that you are the Atma and all actions and interactions are only between Anatma and Anatma. You are the Atma, different from that. So remember that in any crisis, what is the first thing I forget? Vedanta. But we should keep on doing this Nidhasanam And after regular Nidhasanam, maybe for 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, you will find that after some time the assimilation has begun. And when a crisis comes, today I will say what? From that what, I have to move to so what. What? A crisis has come? From that reaction, I have to move to a crisis has come, so what? That movement from what to so what, that is what Vedanta is trying to do. And that is possible only through Brahma Abhyasa Rupa Nididhyasana. 24/7/365. I have to recall, I have to remember that I am Brahman. I have to remember all the teachings. And that is why we keep on saying that, try to attend the chanting classes, because then the mantras and the slokas will be in your memory. And that is the best way of doing Brahma Abhyasa Nididhyasana. The second one is called Samadhi Abhyasa Rupa Nididhyasana. This is the time where I withdraw from all other activities. It's a formal Nididhyasanam where I sit down in a particular posture and I devote time solely for this. And that is why it's called Samadhi, focused attention. In Brahma Abhyasa, remember, I focus on the teaching in and through all my activities. In and through all Vivahara, I recall the teaching. But in Samadhi Rupa Abhyasa, I drop everything else. And for that short time, 15 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour, I focus on the teaching also. And Krishna talks about this in the 6th chapter, Bhagavad Gita. And these verses 10 and 11 of this Upanishad, of this particular section, the 3rd section, this is the basis on which the 6th chapter has been propounded by Krishna. And Krishna has borrowed heavily from the Kathopanishad. And here, there is a very beautiful teaching in Kaivalya Upanishad, which is the next Upanishad that we shall be doing. In that, the teacher says, during your meditation, become a temporary sannyasi. When you leave your chappals outside the meditation room, you will leave your relationships also. So, yada, nididhyasana kale. What should be done? This abhyasa he is talking about is nididhyasana kale, at that particular time. And therefore, it is samadhi abhyasa, focused attention. Now, what should you focus on? It can be Atma. It can be the mithyatvam, the mithya status of Anatma. Either of these you can focus on. Because ultimately, all Vedanta is reduced into 3 statements. Brahma Satyam, Jagat Mithya, Brahma Eva, Jiva Apara. Any of these 3 statements I can focus on. And so he says, Pancha Jnanani, these Pancha Jnana Indriyas, Avatishtante, they remain, they abide without looking outwards, without looking for any sense organs. And if the sense organs remain quiet, remember, if the sense organs remain quiet, the mind can start getting activated. And therefore, Atmani eva, they have to be brought to rest in the Atma. So that is one statement which you will hear very often. Mind should rest in the Atma. Sense organ should rest in the Atma. So it has a very special meaning here. The mind resting in the Atma means entertaining only thoughts of Atma. Because ultimately you can say everything rests in Brahman alone, everything rests in Atma alone. Where is the question of my mind resting in Atma? So here, specific meaning is Atma Akara Vrittihi. All the vrittis, all the thoughts should have Atma Akara, should be about the Atma only. And initially, in the what I call beginning stages, this thought has to be deliberately generated, consciously generated. With a lot of practice, it becomes a habit afterwards. And this vritti, as I said, can be centered upon any of the 3 major components of Vedanta: Brahma Satyam, Jaganmithya, Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha. So let the mind also abide in the Atma, not involve itself with any thoughts about Anatma. This means, may you not be distracted during Vedantic meditation. Therefore, intellect is also not involved in thinking of any other subject matter. Sense organs are withdrawn, and therefore, let that intellect, buddhi, na vicheshtati. The buddhi will not wander away. Right? And if I should remember that if I need to be happy, I don't need any objects in the world. I need myself only. When I discover that fact, Atmani Atmana eva. I can be happy by myself, in myself. That state is called Paramam Gatim Ahupu. Is the highest possible state in yoga. Dhyana Abhyasa. What is the advantage? We are talking about Samadhi status over here, right? We are talking about, not talking about Brahma Rupa, we are talking about Samadhi Rupa. Therefore, the advantage here is that for a short time when you are actually sitting for meditation, there is no triputi. The binary format gets well established with regular practice. We have to remember the binary format remains only as long as you are in Samadhi. One needs to come back from this state, right? And when you are living in the world, in all your activities, it must be Brahma Rupa Abhyasa. You must be constantly remembering that you are Brahman. How do I test whether I am living the Vedantic teaching? The behavior of such a person is given in 3 places in Bhagavad Gita, if you remember. Verse number 54 to 72 of 2nd chapter, which is what the indicators of a Sthita Prajna Lakshanani, we called it. And verse number 13 to 20 of chapter 12, we call it Parabhakta Lakshanani. And verse number 21 to 27 of chapter 14. So these sets of verses, they tell you what is the behavior of a person who is a jnani. Why do they tell you this? Fake it till you make it. Constantly check whether your behavior is in alignment with what is given in those verses. And this constant remembrance, keeping these verses in mind, connecting my behavior to what is given in these verses, contrasting my behavior to what is given in these verses, that is called Brahma Abhyasa Nidhasanam. So with this, we'll stop for today. Any questions? All right. Thank you for your patience. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Om Namah Shivaya. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.